Good morning, 30th Sunday of Ordinary Time, and we read the Gospel of Mark. They reached Jericho, and as Jesus and his disciples left town, a large crowd followed him. A blind beggar named Bartimeus, son of Timaeus, was sitting beside the road. When Bartimeus heard that Jesus of Nazareth was nearby, he began to shout, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." "Be quiet," many of the people yelled at him, but he only shouted louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." When Jesus heard him, he stopped and said, "Tell him to come here." So they called the blind man. "Cheer up," they said. "Come on, he's calling you." Bartimeus threw aside his coat, jumped up, and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked. "My Rabbi," the blind man said, "I want to see." And Jesus said to him, "Go, for your faith has healed you." Instantly the man could see, and he followed Jesus down the road. Bartimeus, the central character of the last miracle of Jesus described by the evangelist Mark, meets Jesus on the outskirts of the city of Jericho, about 30 kilometers from Jerusalem, when the Master was already on his way to the holy city to undergo the Passion. Passover was approaching, so many Jews were going up to Jerusalem, and Jericho was part of the journey. As it happens nowadays, where there is a lot of traffic of people, there are sellers to try to get some economic profit, so Bartimeus was there on the roadside because that way he had more chances to get some money or some help. Bartimeus teaches us 4 necessary attitudes in our relationship with God. The first attitude, the need, to feel ourselves in need of God. Bartimeus feels in need, very much in need of God. We can deduce this not only from what he says, but also from how he says it, in a pure cry, shouting, yelling. He is a prisoner of a situation from which he knows that he alone cannot get out, that he absolutely needs the supernatural help of God. Only Christ can cure him of his blindness and get him out of where he is. To need God's help is the opposite of spiritual Pelagianism. Pelagius was a British monk of the 5th century who, denying the dogma of the original sin, more precisely the fact that we all come into this world inheriting original sin, denied, as a logical consequence, the need of grace, the inner help of God, and therefore man could save himself through his own works without God's intervention. Although the earthquake of this heresy took place in the 5th century, we still experience continuous aftershocks when various forms of Pelagianism appear in the world. For example, the widespread idea that I don't need God, I can live completely happy apart from Him. In 1935, a Spanish philosopher called Javier Zubiri wrote that the problem of God is no longer a problem for many people. They don't even consider it, and Zubiri already thought in the first half of the 20th century that the atheism that was growing would not be a combative and violent atheism against religion, but an atheism of dispensation, of total indifference to the question of the existence of God. In fact, the great metaphysical questions about the ultimate queries, among them the very existence of God, are of no interest anymore. They are not a problem, they are simply not on the cultural horizon. What matters is the usefulness of religion for the quality of life, but God is something of base. God has become a stranger in His own house, in our house. He has become strange reality, alien to life, distant, even non-existent. God, as conceived by the Judeo-Christian tradition, as a personal being who loves us, has become increasingly irrelevant and uninteresting. Not so religion and spiritual quests, which do not diminish. When we speak of God today, Christian images of the divine are very far away and have been replaced by forms of pantheism where God is spoken of as an energy or as if he were the same as the universe, who is even asked for favors and thanked for. In a society where there are fewer and fewer questions that open to the search of God, the believer, rather than giving answers to questions that no one has, must be a provocateur of questions, an evoker of mystery in the midst of a world indifferent to the question of God. There are answers that are born dead because they respond to unasked questions, said Jean-Luc Marion, a French philosopher of the 20th century. Bartimeus brings us face to face with a reality that the world wants to hide. We are beings in need of God. The second attitude, humility. We see in Bartimeus a great humility linked to the need of God that he feels. Humility because he does something that is humiliating, begging, recognizing that he has nothing except the need for help. Lord, have mercy, Son of David, have mercy on me. His hands are empty, and that is precisely what will bring him closer to Jesus. The third attitude, perseverance. Although people tell him to be quiet, not to disturb, Bartimeus perseveres in prayer and cries out louder. And it's not that Jesus didn't hear him the first time, but he wanted Bartimeus to cry out and persevere in his prayer. As St. Augustine said, God wants us to persevere in prayer so that our desire increases, so that our soul expands and can receive the gift that he wants to give us. The fourth attitude, trust. I am struck by the fact that Mark tells us this detail when Jesus sends for him. The Gospel says that at that moment Bartimeus left his cloak, jumped up and went to Jesus. I want to dwell on the fact of leaving the cloak. In the original Greek, it says apobalon, which is more than throwing aside, is to abandon. And that cloak for Bartimeus was absolutely everything. Usually, beggars sit with their cloaks pulled tightly to the ground before them to collect the coins thrown by passersby. This man's cloak was as important to his survival as a boat was to a fisherman or a job table was for a tax collector like Matthew. Just as the others abandoned boats and table jobs to follow Jesus, Bartimeus cast aside cloak and coins to stand before the Son of David. Before he was healed, he had so much joy and so much trust in Jesus that he didn't hesitate to give up what little he had. We don't know if Bartimeus returned afterwards to pick up his cloak after Jesus healed him, but what we know is that in those moments, Bartimeus is not concerned about his cloak at all. Necessity, the need of God, humility, perseverance, and trust. 4 attitudes that we need for the spiritual life. And God bless you.